We have some breaking news here for you on Times Radio this morning. Pope Francis has died. There has been a statement from the Vatican, very short, on Twitter, saying Pope Francis died on Easter Monday today, April the 21st, 2025, at the age of 88 at his residence in the Vatican's Casa Santa Maria. It's extraordinary that just 16 hours ago, the Vice President of the United States of America, J.D. Vance, tweeted, "Today I met with the Holy Father, the Pope, and I'm grateful for his invitation. I pray for his good health." So Catholics around the world will be going into mourning. I'm presenting the Times Radio Breakfast Show this morning with Rosie Wright. And Rosie, you're quite an authority on what actually happens when when the Pope dies. There is an ongoing process that kicks into gear straight away, that even in the middle of the mourning and even in the middle of the sorrow as this news starts to go round the world, things are going to be put in place to choose a replacement.
Yeah, nothing will happen immediately. There's about sort of 10 days of very complicated procedure. I think the first thing just to say right now is there will be collective shock and real mourning for the over 1 billion people that the Pope represents. And I think real shock, because just yesterday, Pope Francis was greeting worshippers, Catholics, anyone in Rome outside the Vatican, to wish them a happy Easter. And we'll be talking to Tom Kingston. I'm sure we'll speak to him shortly here on Times Radio, the Rome correspondent for the Times. Easter, it is hard to express how important and significant this is at the moment for Christians, for Catholics, for the global Catholic community, then particularly for the Pope. Such an important, significant day, and very significant that yesterday he was well enough and able enough to speak to people. We don't know any of the details at this point about exactly why or how he died, but we know he has been very unwell, dying at the age of 88. You know, in the last few weeks, it was on Valentine's Day, on the 14th of February, the Pope was admitted to hospital for bronchitis treatment. Actually, he only has 1.5 lungs. That's because of an illness he had when he was just a teenager. So he was very susceptible and prone to significant problems, particularly when it came to things like pneumonia. We heard actually several times over the last 6 weeks or so that the Pope was in a critical condition. Things like prolonged respiratory crises. It sounded at times extremely perilous, and he definitely rallied. We saw a photograph of him inside hospital after he'd been there for about a month or so. And, you know, we heard his voice at one point. It took quite a long time for his voice to recover because of the treatment that he'd been having. And it was sort of a very wobbly voice, and then real sort of optimism and hope when he was released from hospital. There'll be lots of people mourning and in great distress to hear this news. Let's go to Dominic Hauschild, who joins us now on the line. Dominic, thank you very much for your time. This is a bit of a shock.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think anybody was expecting this. After the Pope came out of hospital only a few weeks ago, it seemed like he was getting better. The doctors in his medical team were very confident that he had improved significantly over the course of his stay in hospital. So yeah, I think a lot of people will be waking up this morning on Easter Monday feeling a sense of shock that the Pope has died.
Dom, I know you've spent a lot of time reporting for the Times and the Sunday Times in and out of the Vatican over the last month or so. Just talk us through that timeline a little bit. You know, we had the Vatican absolutely heaving with press and journalists as the global media were keen to find out exactly how he was doing. And it seemed like the danger was over, it had passed.
Absolutely. I mean, when the Pope entered hospital, he had been in hospital before. When he was a young man, he had half of his lung removed because of a serious infection. So, every winter he would have health issues, concerns. He was in hospital for a significant amount of time last year. But something about this felt different. He had severe pneumonia in both lungs. He had an infection. He had, it revealed with testing, anemia, and all sorts of other really nasty medical conditions. it seemed that he was getting better at the start. He took meetings with Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister. The Vatican said that he was doing work, he was sitting up in bed, he was reading the papers. He then took a turn for the worst. He had bronchial spasms, vomiting incidents, in which his medical team said that he very much could die during that stay. But then again, it flipped around. He started to get better. He started to feel better. His medical team said he was improving significantly, culminating in a press conference a few weeks ago where the medical team said, yes, it was touch and go at some points. He felt very unwell. He definitely could have died. But he now no longer leads the round-the-clock care. He was going to be sent back to the sent back to the Castel San Angelo, which is the sort of residence that he lives in the Vatican grounds. And he's going to have a medical team look after him there, but he was on the road to recovery. So, yes, as I say, it's certainly a shock now.
On the road to recovery and addressing people yesterday on Easter Sunday.
Absolutely. I mean, he hadn't given an address like that for quite a while. It's the called the Urbi et Orbi, sort of the around the world address that he does on Easter Sunday, and certainly, I mean. It's a surprise. I mean, of course, we don't really know much more what's going on at the moment. All we have is this sort of small flash. Although I've just got a note in from AFP that the Cardinal Kevin Farrell said on the Vatican Telegram that this morning at 7:35 a.m. the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the home of the Father, which of course means that he's passed.
There is a real complex and traditional procedure ahead at play, something that the Vatican is well prepared for and will have been putting in additional preparations over the last few weeks. But it's hard to describe, really, the global significance that the death of a pope has.
I mean, absolutely. There are billions of Catholics around the world, and this is going to be... I mean, we talk about sort of press moments. This is going to have the attention of the world's press for weeks now. If helpful, I mean, I can run through sort of what happens next. When the Pope dies, there are 9 days of funeral ceremonies, ending in a funeral mass on the 9th day. So 9 days from now, there's going to be the main funeral mass. At the same time, all the cardinals from around the world are going to start arriving in Rome for what we call the General Congregation of the Cardinals. Is where they gather for meetings and to deliver speeches, setting out what they think the Church should do. It's a good opportunity for presenting oneself as a potential Pope. After 15 days after the death of the Pope, we then have what's called the conclave, which is the election of the new Pope, although that could be extended to 20 days. When the conclave begins, then they will start voting, the process that we know. Obviously, there was the film Conclave that came out this year that won an Oscar, in which we will find out at some point who the new Pope is going to be. But for now, everybody's going to be thinking about this Pope. They're going to be reflecting on his legacy and thinking about the past several decade of Pope Francis's reign over the Catholic Church.
There's even quite very specific processes about announcing and pronouncing the death of a pope. Of course, most popes, like exactly Pope Francis, who has passed away this morning, serve until the day they die. It's going to be interesting, isn't it, Dom? Because this next period is very much about a period of national mourning. Italy will mark that, I'm sure people around the world will as well. All of the sort of politics about who comes next, the next pope, that will all wait, but we will potentially start to see some movements, some characters, some individuals try to put themselves forward. You can't sort of campaign to be pope, you need to be elected. So there'll be a lot of sort of, as well, in the midst of the mourning, some politics behind the scenes at play.
Yes, absolutely. And just on your point first about the interesting sort of ceremonies that happen when a pope dies. Two of the very interesting things is that there's this man called the Carmelengo of the Holy Catholic Roman Church, who will ascertain the death of the Pope in the presence of the papal master of ceremonies and a number of others of the papal household. The way that they do that is two methods. Firstly, they call the Pope by his given name, by the name that his mother gave him. So in this case, it's Jorge Bergoglio. And then the other thing that they do is that they take a little gold hammer and they hit him on the top of the head, just to double check that he is actually dead. Once that's done, they will take his ring, the ring of his seal of office, and ceremonially break the ring to show that his time as the pontiff is now over, and then it goes on from there. But yes, you're right. We're now in a period where, last month, I was in Rome. I was reporting on sort of the race that's already begun in the Vatican, behind closed doors, about who's going to be the next pope. And there's a lot of horse trading that will already have gone on. There are people, jockeying for position, trying to get their support in line. But now is really the moment where the key contenders will be thinking, what do I need to do to become pope now? If helpful, I can sort of talk through who those key contenders might be.
Yeah, I think we'll come on to that in a moment or two. Dom, thank you very much. Dom Hauschild, the reporter for The Times and The Sunday Times, who spent an awful lot of time in and out of the Vatican over the last few weeks or so as the Pope's health significantly deteriorated. Then he rallied. Of course, if you've just joined us, the breaking news, the Vatican have announced that Pope Francis, aged 88, died this morning at 7:35. Actually, when Pope Francis has his funeral, that will be in 9 days' time after this period of national mourning. It's going to be a much more pared back, sort of much more austere version of a funeral. He was very keen, actually, to sort of change those rites to have a much more, it won't feel that humble, but more humble ceremony than perhaps popes of the past have had. We're going to keep you across this morning. You're listening to Times Radio Breakfast.
Yeah, Dominic mentioned there the Carmelengo. It's Cardinal Kevin Farrell, who's the Carmelengo of the Apostolic Chamber. In the statement that was released this morning, he says of Pope Francis, his entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite merciful love of the one and true God. Let's speak now to Times Radio's Andrew Neil. Good morning, Andrew. Your immediate reflections on this news, which reached just less than 20 minutes ago.
Indeed, good morning. A very sad day for the world's 1.4 billion Catholics and for many other Christians who are not Catholic. Pope Francis was something of a one-off. He was a man who was humble, had great humility, didn't like the trappings of the wealth that had previously surrounded popes. He was in the tradition of the Latin American peasant priests. And very connected to ordinary people as opposed to the better off and the upper middle class and so on. My understanding is that he didn't actually live in the main Vatican quarters. He lived in a boarding house, which was part of the Vatican, and that he didn't travel in the usual extravagant way. He used a Vatican minibus to get around. So he didn't change things by reopening great theological issues during his papacy. That wasn't his role. He didn't see that. But he did reconfigure the papacy to be more focused on the poor of the world, the dispossessed. And of course, I think something very significant or poignant, that his death should occur on Easter Monday. And I expect many Catholics will be giving thanks that he got a chance to address the faithful this Easter weekend, even though he died on this very Easter Monday, probably the most important date in the Christian calendar.
Yes, and you do marvel at his strength of character to be able to do that, because clearly he was ailing and his health, which we know has been significantly problematic over the last few months. He managed to have that strength of character and that strength of will to come and address the faithful, as you say, on one of the most important weekend in the church's calendar.
He was a fighter, and he had multiple health issues, and that the age of when you're in your mid-80s, and he was 88 and he died today, all these health issues are much more serious if you're 78 or 68. But he fought through them. I think there was, he had just seen the Vice President of the United States. He had started to meet people again. And I think he was determined in this particular Easter to have at least one more Easter broadcast to the world. And that Easter broadcast, I think it was Rosie was saying, is a very important one coming out of the Vatican, because it's a broadcast for the world, for the Catholics of the world. And he got it in, and very sad, of course, that he's died. But I think a lot of people will take comfort from the fact that he did do the great Easter broadcast.
You described him as a peasant cardinal, one who grew up in that tradition and who lived as frugally as one could, despite being a pope. And he lived by example, and yet perhaps wasn't one of the most liturgical giants or reforming popes that have been seen in the Vatican over the last 50, 60 years. What do you think his legacy will therefore be to Catholics and the wider world?
Well, I think his legacy will come out of I said, I didn't describe him as a peasant priest. I said he seemed to me to be in the tradition of Latin American peasant priests. And his focus was always on, as in a way, was the focus of Jesus, was on the poor and the dispossessed. That was what he concentrated on. And that has not always been a theme of popes down the ages. And I think that reconfiguring of the Catholic Church to do that, to make that its priority, that will be his legacy. And depending on who is now chosen to succeed him, we shall see if that is a legacy which has legs, or whether the Church now takes a different direction.
And of course, all the eyes of the world are going to be on the Vatican over the next 2 weeks now, because for so many Catholics around the world and for world politics, in a sense, the choosing of a new pope is significant. It's theatrical to a degree, but it also matters as well.
It's a global event. There's no question about that. The eyes of the world will be on it. I think we'll all be rereading Robert Harris's Conclave. Those of us like myself who are not specialists in these matters, to get an idea of how these things happen, or watch the Conclave movie again. Many more than Catholics will just be following this, because it is such an important event. And it's an event of great tradition, steeped in history all the way back, again, this being Easter Monday. First Pope was St. Peter, so it goes all the way back to the time of Jesus Christ. And I think that's what gives it a special feature in world history. That's what makes it of significance beyond even the Catholic Church. And of course, it was famously said, I think it was Hitler or the Nazis who asked, or maybe it was Mussolini, anyway, it was some unsavory character, asked, how many divisions does the Pope have? And of course, the modern Pope has no divisions at all. But that doesn't mean to say the modern Pope doesn't have power or influence. Otherwise, all these world leaders would not be beating a path to the door of the Pope in the Vatican. So it is a matter not just of religious significance, but depending on who they choose, it can be of some political significance as well. Remember the role the previous Pope played in the final days of communism, and a Polish Pope, and played a part, really, in the end of that Soviet system and the Soviet tyranny over Eastern Europe.
Andrew, indeed, thank you for now. Andrew Neil there,